Welcome to Forrest Gump's Nightly News. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Alexis.
Where tonight we are taking it back to the 80s. This is the decade that brought us Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Michael Jackson, and Madonna. MTV was first introduced August 1st of 1981, where they changed American culture forever with the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's rock and roll." The Summer Olympics were also held in 1984 in Los Angeles, California, which the Soviet Union boycotted because U.S. did the same in the Moscow Olympics 4 years before. Acquired immune deficiency syndrome, also known as AIDS, was also discovered in 1984. The miraculous story of Ryan White, who contracted this disease by a blood transfusion for hemophilia, made headlines in 1985. He fought for the right to education in his school and won. January 28th of 1986 was the day the Challenger and 7 astronauts launched from Kennedy Space Center, which exploded 73 seconds into flight. This was later discovered that the explosion resulted from a leak in one of the solid rocket boosters that ignited the main liquid fuel tank. July 14th of 1986, Titanic was found at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean floor. We then ended the year with the Berlin Wall being torn down on November 9th, which separated West and East Germany. Ronald Reagan finished his speech with the famous words, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Lindsay Thacker is now live at the scene where the event had taken place.
Thanks, Taylor. We're now reporting live from the remains of the Berlin Wall. We're going to flash back to Gorbachev and the liberation of the USSR. Gorbachev was born March 2nd, 1931. His fame began in 1985 when he became the General Secretary of the Communist Party for the Soviet Union. At this point, the USSR was having a very hard time, so things needed to be changed. Soon after his election, he set up an anti-alcohol campaign. This banning of alcohol was very similar to the American Prohibition that occurred in the 1920s. This was the beginning of change for the USSR. Gorbachev then made many reforms that allowed freedoms that the Soviet Union had never had before. He gave them freedom to go out of the country without the control of a satellite, eased censorship laws, and increased accessibility for the affairs of their government and its doing. Gorbachev also allowed people to interact with the media of other countries and gave citizens a voice in what they were doing. All of these changes took place in the USSR, made them more inclined with other modern industrialized countries. Within a couple years, Gorbachev realized that this is not what the country needed. It was leading to the downfall of communism in the USSR. The 1980s were big years for the leaders of the USSR and the US. President Carter and the USSR minister had recently reached an agreement and they signed the SALT II treaty. This treaty banned the production of missiles and the amount of nuclear arms that each of them could possess. On June 12, 1987, President Reagan went over and spoke at the Berlin Wall. He stated the famous lines, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." This caused many liberating campaigns that caused contradictions between the people and the government. But that's okay, because 2 years after the speech, on November 9th, 1989, the gates came up and the Berlin Wall started to be taken down. This caused the USSR to collapse in 1991, and Gorbachev was elected out of presidency in 1991. Back to you, Alexis.
Thank you, Lindsay. During the presidency of Ronald Reagan, sources found that Lieutenant Oliver North was the one leading the Iran-Contra affair. The Contras was trying to go over to Nicaragua to overthrow the left-wing government. Our Congress did not approve, so they restricted the president from being able to send the Contras off. Behind Congress's back, we started selling weapons off to Iran to bring hostages back to the U.S. and receive money. Lieutenant Oliver North took this money and purchased military supplies. He used the military supplies to give to the Contras to send them off to Nicaragua. They were not able to sneak around the Congress for very long. When the Congress found out, they did an investigation on President Ronald Reagan, just to find out that Reagan had no idea it was going on. Lieutenant Oliver North was questioned at a congressional hearing and found guilty. Instead of receiving 10 years in prison and fines of $750,000, he received a punishment of $150,000 in fines, a 2-year probation, suspended from sentence for 3 years, and 1,200 hours in community service. These are the weapons the investigators found being sold to Iran in exchange for the hostages. Recapping the Iran-Contra affair. Since Iran and Israel are political enemies, Israel brokered the arms shipment, which was over millions of US dollars. Because Iran is the political enemy of the US, Iran purchased US arms at high prices. Now out to Shelby, who is at the university.
Thank you, Alexis. Reporting live from the university that Title IX got their inspiration to form an activist group for equal rights among women in the educational systems. Equal rights movements were also inspired by the National Organization of Women, also known as NOW, another feminist group fighting against the unequal pay. They expressed their concerns that men and women do the same amount of work, yet men get paid more than women. These activist groups focus on the inequalities, such as their stereotypes as stay-at-home moms, housewives, and housekeepers. Finally, the Equal Rights Amendment was proposed to fix these problems. It was introduced and passed from the Senate, then to the House of Representatives. However, has only been passed by 35 states and needs 38 states. The deadline was March 22, 1997, yet was extended to June 30th of 1982. Even with the extension, the amendment wasn't passed. Citizens against the amendment claimed the extension time was violating the amendment process. Feminine activists who contributed to these movements were Betty Friedan, who wrote The Feminine Mystique, which explained all these problems, and Susan B. Anthony led protests. That concludes our segment for the 80s.
Don't move. When you get up first.
Go.
You ready?
I said go!
It's Taylor.
And I'm Alexis.
Tonight,
Was this your plan, Gigi?